All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into a text called Terra Infinita. And let me tell you, it paints a picture of our world that is, well, it's a lot stranger and way more contained than you could possibly imagine. So, the whole thing kicks off with this really unsettling line from the narrator, a woman named Helen Morris. She's basically telling us that our world, our existence, isn't a home at all. No, she calls it a dark, sinister abyss where we've been completely cut off from what's really out there. And then she throws this wild idea out there. What if our reality isn't what we think it is? What if it's more like a carefully managed enclosure, a human farm, where our history has been totally messed with and our freedoms are just an illusion? According to this text, our world, everything we know, is basically a prison. It's sealed off by these enormous ice walls. And these aren't just natural formations. Nope, they're described as man-made, or, well, entity-made barriers, put there specifically to keep us in. Okay, so if we're stuck inside some kind of container, what's on the outside, right? Well, this is where the source material just blows the doors off, describing a reality that's so much bigger and more crowded than we've ever been led to believe. This is where the text brings in this idea of the Great Dome. Think of it like a giant cosmic terrarium that holds all of existence. It's the ultimate boundary. And here's a really interesting tidbit. Even for the powerful races inside the dome, the real fear is what might exist beyond it. And get this, inside this one Great Dome, the text says there are at least 178 different worlds, or circle environments. Now, just let that sink in. Our entire world, with all its history and people and places, is just one of those. You can just imagine the scale here. Our whole world is just one little bubble in a massive collection. Each one is its own self-contained dome with its own climate and its own civilizations. And trying to fly between them? Forget about it. You'd need some seriously advanced tech to find the hidden passages on land or sea. So that brings us to the big question, right? If we're on a farm, then who or what are the farmers? The text points to two main groups, two hostile colonizing races that are calling the shots. Well, the text calls our direct controllers the custodians. They're described as this parasitic race that literally feeds on negative human energy. They're the ones who supposedly built the ice walls, and they look at us as nothing more than cattle, actively manipulating society to stir up the fear and sadness they need to survive. But yeah, the custodians aren't the only ones in charge. There's another group, the Anunnaki, and they're described as the strongest colonizing race in the whole dome. Their whole game is way more insidious. They show up looking like friends, offering amazing technology, and then once a civilization depends on them, bam, they show their true colors. Okay, so what we're seeing here is a pretty clear power structure. You've got the custodians, who are like our local hands-on jailers, managing our little walled land. But the Anunnaki, they're playing this grand cosmic chess game across the entire dome. Both are hostile, for sure, but their methods couldn't be more different. One uses brute force and fear, the other uses cunning deception. All right, so how on earth did things get this bad? Well, the source talks about this whole forgotten history, a time of rebellion, taking us way back to a time when humans weren't prisoners. So way back before the ice walls, the text describes this incredible golden age called the Great Tartaria. This was supposedly a global civilization where humans and a race of giants lived side by side, building these breathtaking cities with advanced free energy, a history that, according to the text, has been completely wiped from our memory. And this is absolutely crucial. The main weapon the colonizers use to stay in control is something they call a reset. The idea is, whenever a civilization gets too advanced or a rebellion almost succeeds, they trigger some kind of global catastrophe. It wipes the slate clean, erases our collective memory, and they get to start over with a handful of survivors under even tighter control. So this timeline really just shows you the whole tragic story from start to finish, at least according to the text. It starts with this amazing civilization, Great Tartaria, which leads to this huge war for freedom against the custodians, but they lose. And after that defeat, a last reset is triggered. That catastrophic event is what created our current reality, trapping the survivors and rewriting our entire history. And the fallout from that defeat was just devastating. Apparently, the custodians were absolutely terrified by how close they came to losing their best colony. That's us. So they brought down the hammer, imposing their toughest rules yet, locking us up physically behind the ice walls and mentally inside a new system designed to divide us and drain our energy. But, and this is a big but, according to this text, the story is far from over. Because despite all this control, humanity apparently has a secret weapon, something the colonizers can't get their hands on. And this power, it's described as our spiritual core, the source of life. And the reason our controllers are so scared of it is because it's the one thing they can't touch. They can mess with our minds and our world, but they can't sever this fundamental connection we have to something greater. So, the way out, according to this document, isn't a physical war. It's an internal one. It's a journey of waking up, and it's laid out in these 3 steps. First, you have to silence all that mental programming. Second, you have to know your enemy, understand how they keep us divided. And finally, you have to reclaim your own power by tapping back into that inner source of life. And that's where the text leaves us, with this final, really powerful idea that we are the source of life, and it's time to wake up. It suggests that our amazing potential is the real reason we were locked up in the first place, and that realizing it, well, that's the only key to the cage.